welcome back to my channel. I am Amber from Amber's Books and More, and today I'm here with a wrap up for the entire year of 2017, and I have a little bit of some geekish stats for you guys. I'm really excited. I'm also going to do my December wrap up since it's such a short little wrap up. But I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in and get started and let you know. First, I'm going to go into how December was, and then I'm going to go in how the entire year of 2017 was. I am really proud of myself, and some of my stats surprised me. But yeah, let's just jump right in and get started. So for the month of December, I actually only read 3 books. I was a little bit disappointed in myself and the fact that I wish that I would have maybe read a few more, but I did go into kind of a holiday reading slump, which is normal for me. So I don't know why I even thought that I would do great for December. But I do have one really good book that I read and 2 kind of disappointing books. So let's just get started. The first book I read was Before the Devil Breaks You. This is by Libba Bray. This is the 3rd book of the Diviners series. I originally thought this was a trilogy, but it turns out there are supposed to be or planned to be 4 books in this series. And this is the 3rd one, and it basically takes off right after the events of the last one. I can't really tell you what this one is about because it would be a spoiler, but the entire series is about these group of diviners, which are people that have special abilities, and they're living in 1920s New York City. And it's, it deals a lot with like racism and prejudice and, because people are prejudiced only against races, but against the people that are diviners in this book and how they kind of try to save people. And it's got some ghosts and some really creepy things that happen. But it's very diverse. It's a great group of characters. There's an asexual character. There's a crippled character. There's a couple of gay characters. There's a bisexual character. There's, Asian Americans. There's blacks. There's white. There's just a very diverse range of characters. And I really love this. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. And I cannot wait for next year or for this year to read the next one. So the next book that I read for December was Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. This is a young adult book about a couple that meets. It was a little bit disappointing, and it was not exactly what I expected. I did give this 4 stars on Goodreads, but I think that actually thinking back, it's probably more like a 3.5 stars. There was a lot of issues that I had with this book that I wish were different. But I enjoyed it, but it was just okay, and it was a little disappointing. This was a copy that was sent to me by Julie over at Pages and Pens. She was unhauling it, and, gladly she offered it to me. So I am excited that I read it, and I will read more of Rainbow Rowell's work, but this one wasn't necessarily my favorite. The last book that I read for December was very disappointing, and that was Artemis by Andy Weir. If you've been a part of my channel for any length of time, you know that I was very excited about reading this book. I love sci-fi. It's of my favorite books video that I will leave linked up above. Sci-fi was a big one for me that I read this year that I really liked. So this is about a girl that is kind of a smuggler, and she lives on the moon on the city named Artemis, and she bites off more than she can chew. And then so it kind of becomes more of a heisty type situation. It sounded really good, but this main character is definitely a character that you can tell was written by a man that didn't understand women, and a man that was like, well, this is how he thinks women should be or women are. And it's not really that great of a representation of how a woman acts or feels. But I did leave a detailed review of this on Goodreads. I will leave that linked down in the down bar below if you want to check out that, and also add me on Goodreads, because there are some books that I do leave detailed reviews on. There's some books that are just good, or I'll just save it for a video. But for this one, I left a very detailed review. So definitely check that out. So those are the 3 books that I read for December. Now let's get on to my 2017 yearly stats. I am a bit of a spreadsheet nerd, and I love keeping a spreadsheet for everything. And I have a really detailed spreadsheet that I've created for my reading goals and for my what goal, like what I'm reading, and it kind of breaks it down on if it is what genre, what age range it is, if it's YA, adult, middle grade, things like that. And I was thinking about doing a video where I, show my screen and I go through on how to create these types of spreadsheets. If you want to see something like that, please let me know down below. I just have to come up with a really good way to edit that and share my screen and record it. But if you are interested in that, let me know, and I definitely will. I also want to do one for not reading, but for writing goals. And I'm excited because I love spreadsheets, and so just the thought of recording myself talking about how to create spreadsheets is like a nerd's dream in my head. So yeah, let me know if that's something that you might want. So let's get on to the stats. So when I'm looking down at my spreadsheets, and I'm sorry if you don't like that I look down, but I have to look at it in order to see what I'm talking about. But so for the year of 2017, I read a total of 127 books. My goal on Goodreads started at 50. I soon realized that I could read more than 50 books, so I upped it in probably March or April to 100 books, and I even exceeded that. So for next year, I'm definitely going to keep it at 100 books. I am doing more writing now, so I don't want to overdo my Goodreads goal, but I did read 127 books, which I'm very happy about. Of those 127 books, 26 of them were considered tomes, which is a book that is at least 500 pages or larger. So the largest book according to Goodreads that I read this year was A Clash of Kings, which is by George R.R. Martin, and it is a part of the Song of Ice and Fire series or the Game of Thrones series. And that one was over 1,000. Let me find it on here. And I believe this was the only book. Yeah, it was 1,010 pages, and that was the largest book that I read this year. And it was the only one I believe that I read that was over 1,000 pages. So this year I also started reading graphic novels. So of that 127 books that I read, 40 of those were considered graphic novels or manga, which actually only like 2 of them were manga. The rest were just straight graphic novels or graphic memoirs. And I'm definitely happy with that number. I do want that number to go up next year. I have found a love for graphic novels, and I'm so happy that I read 40 of them. I'm starting to understand what I like in a graphic novel and what I don't like in a graphic novel. And there's so many out there that I haven't read yet. So I want to make that at least 50 books next year of graphic novels. So we will see if I can hit that goal next year. One thing that I do wish that I would have done with this spreadsheet this year that I did not do is I didn't keep track of any kind of books that were debut authors, new to me authors, which were a lot of new to me authors this year. Most of the books I read were new to me authors. And I also didn't keep track of how many physical books versus audio books that I was reading, but that is something I'm adding to my spreadsheet for next year. So definitely check out next year where I add that to my stats. So let's get into the nitty gritty of here. So of the 127 books, I had 38 5-star books. I had 61 4-star books. I had 23 3-star books. I only had 3 2-star books, and I only had 2 1-star books. So as you can see, I feel like sorry about that. So as you can see, I feel like I had a broad range of books that I liked that I was reading. I do think that a lot of times whenever I finish a book, the ending, I really like the ending, or I like the plot twist that it has taken. And so I always say, oh my God, 4 stars, I loved it. But then upon retrospect, sometimes it will go up or down, and I think I'm a little too nice to books. So I'm going to try, as a goal next year, is to get a little bit better with the rating system and really think hard about, and maybe even sit on it for at least 24 hours before I rate it. because I think that more of those books were probably 2 and 3 star books than what I have on here. So let's get into the genre. So there I have 10 different genres that I read this year, which is a pretty broad spectrum of genres, which I'm very happy about. So they are as follows. I will start with the largest genre that I read and go to the lowest. Now, the only exception here is graphic novels. I counted them this year as their own genre. I think next year I'm going to change that to just age group maybe, and then actually separate it into genre, because I do know that some of them that were like graphic memoirs were more contemporary, and then I read like Saga and I Hate Fairyland, which were more on the sci-fi or fantasy spectrum. So I think I may split that up like I do a normal book next year, but I didn't really understand how to separate them this year. So I read 40 graphic novels, and then I read 37 were fantasy books, 20 were sci-fi books, which I was actually thinking that sci-fi was higher than fantasy, so that one surprised me a little bit. And then the next highest one was contemporary, which I read 10 books. I read 9 thriller books, which surprises me. I thought I read more thrillers this year, and that is a big goal, is to read more contemporary and more thriller next year. And then the next highest was horror, which was only 3 books, which were all Stephen King. And then I read 2 nonfiction books, 3 poetry books, which is a little higher, but you know, and 1 historical fiction book, which was The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, which I actually did enjoy, but I'm not much for historical fiction, so I'm not planning on upping that for next year. I do want to read more thriller, more horror, and more poetry, and more contemporary next year, and of course more graphic novels. But now the age range group is something that really surprised me. I assumed I read mostly sci-fi, thriller, adult. That was what I thought. But it turns out I actually read 66 young adult books. That's crazy. You know, I really thought that that was going to be lower. And I read 47 adult. So I thought that those numbers would have kind of been flipped a little bit. And then I read 7 middle grade novels, which I definitely want to up next year. I want to read at least 10 middle grade novels next year. I read 5 classics, which classics are not my favorite, so I don't actually plan on reading very many classics next year. And I read 2 nonfiction books, which I don't. Nonfiction is something that if it interests me, I'll read it, but it's not going to be a goal. So that's the genres and the age range that I read. So I also have some readathons. I was involved in the August Tome Topple, Contemporary-a-thon, the Mini Emoji in this year. I also did the full Emoji-a-thon, and I did one more. I think it was I did 2. I know I did 2 Tome Topples, but I didn't keep it on my spreadsheet. I did the one in April and August. So I did 2 Tome Topples, a Contemporary-a-thon, an Emoji-a-thon, and a Mini Emoji, and that was it. So I did 5 readathons this year. My most successful readathons were the full Emoji-a-thon and the both Tome Topples. I read quite a bit of books for. And so I also have a set of series that I started this year that I wanted to finish. And so I had Lunar Chronicles, which I completely finished the entire series. I have the Illuminae Files, which I've read the 2 books that are out. Obsidio doesn't come out until 2018. The Passenger Duology, I finished. The Darker Shade of Magic trilogy, I finished. The Akotar Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy, I finished. The School for Good and Evil trilogy, I finished. The Mara Dyer trilogy, I finished. The Archived trilogy, the first 2 books are out. I have since only read the first book, so I still need to read the second book and then the third book if or when it comes out. The Ember and the Ashes trilogy, I read the first 2 books that are out. Reaper does not come out until next year. or this year. Song of Ice and Fire has 5 books that are out. I have read the first 2 books, and I don't know for sure if I want to finish. I may DNF that series. I'm not sure. I started the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I only read the first book. I still need to read the second 2 books, which I definitely will get to in 2018. So then there's the Starbound trilogy, which is these Broken Stars, the Shadow World. I finished that trilogy. The Themis Files trilogy. The first 2 books are currently out, and I finished both of them. The Deanna Madden trilogy, I finished. And then the Diviner series, I read the first 3 books that are currently out. The 4th book is yet untitled and yet has a release date. So that is basically all of my stats and how I did for the year of 2017. That's all I have for you today. Let me know how you did in the year 2017 and what your goals are for next year. I'm excited to get 2018 started on a high note. Happy New Year. Today is New Year's Day. And yeah, that's all I have for you today. I hate ending these videos, just so you know. But until next time, have a great day wherever you are. And I love you. Bye.